I was standing in the bank lobby in my wet boots, water from the slush outside still dripping off my coat, when the teller looked up at me with that particular expression, the kind that means she already knows something you don't. She typed something, frowned at her screen, typed again. Then she said very quietly, like she was delivering a diagnosis, "I'm sorry, ma'am. The box was accessed this morning. There's nothing left inside." My ears went hollow. The kind of hollow where you can hear your own heartbeat but nothing else makes sense. The box. Our box. The one that was supposed to hold $94,000 in certified checks from the closing on our house, the house Derek and I had sold just 48 hours earlier. The money we were going to use to start over somewhere new. The money I had signed my name to a dozen times across a dozen documents. Gone. Accessed. This morning. And Derek wasn't answering his phone. I need to back up, because none of this makes sense without understanding what the last 2 years of my life actually looked like, and who was really running the show the whole time. My name is Natalie. I'm 31 years old. I sell enterprise software for a mid-sized tech company out of a suburb just outside Washington, D.C., and I am very, very good at reading people. It's literally my job. I can tell within 12 minutes of a discovery call whether a prospect is going to convert or waste my time. I close deals. I read rooms. I notice things. Which is why what happened to me is so humiliating that it took me months to say it out loud. I met Derek Calloway at a friend's birthday dinner in early spring, 2 years before that February morning in the bank. He was tall, calm, funny in a dry way that I liked. He worked in commercial property management, which meant he understood leases, maintenance cycles, and what it meant when something looked fine on the outside but had structural problems underneath. I thought that was interesting. I did not think about it as a metaphor until much, much later. We dated for 7 months. We moved in together after 9. We got married at the D.C. courthouse on a Thursday in late January. No big ceremony, just 2 witnesses and lunch at a dim sum place we both loved. It felt right. It felt like something we chose deliberately instead of performing for other people. I was 29 and I had never felt so certain about anything. His mother, Diane Calloway, sent flowers. That's the first thing you need to know about Diane. She sent flowers, beautiful ones, pale cream roses and eucalyptus, arranged by someone who clearly knew what they were doing. The card said, "Wishing you both every happiness. Love, Mom." And when we saw her for dinner 2 weeks later, she hugged me warmly, complimented my haircut, asked thoughtful questions about my job, and refilled my wine glass without being asked. She was, by every observable measure, a lovely woman. I want to be precise about this, because I've told this story to a few people, and the response is always some version of, "Oh, a monster-in-law, classic." And that framing misses what was actually frightening about Diane. She wasn't loud. She didn't criticize my cooking or make comments about my body or show up uninvited. She was perfectly, consistently pleasant. She remembered details, my sales quota cycle, the name of my regional manager, the fact that I preferred sparkling water to still. She asked follow-up questions. She listened. She was, I would eventually understand, gathering information the whole time. Derek and I lived in a 2-bedroom condo in a development about 20 minutes from the Beltway. We had 2 cats, a gray tabby named Vince, and a small tortoiseshell female named Petra, who had very strong and opposing opinions about where to sleep, and made their feelings known nightly. The condo was mine before the marriage. I'd bought it at 26, put down 12%, and refinanced once. It was small, but it was mine, and I was proud of it in the quiet way you're proud of something you built without anyone's help. When Derek and I decided, about 18 months into our marriage, that we wanted more space and a yard and maybe a neighborhood with actual trees, selling the condo made sense. The market in our area was genuinely insane. Comparable units were moving for $30,000 to $40,000 over asking within days. My realtor, a woman named Cordelia who wore statement earrings and did not sugarcoat anything, told me we could realistically net somewhere between $85,000 and $100,000 after paying off the remaining mortgage, depending on final sale price and closing costs. We listed in January. We had an offer over asking within a week. The closing was scheduled for mid-February. Everything was moving fast, but it felt like good fast, like momentum. Derek was excited, or he seemed excited. He talked about neighborhoods, school districts we might want, even though we didn't have kids yet, proximity to the metro. He made a spreadsheet of houses we could look at once we had the cash in hand. He showed it to me on a Sunday night, while Vince walked across the keyboard and Petra watched from the top of the refrigerator, with the specific disdain that only small cats can project. Diane came to visit that same week. She came down from Baltimore. She lived alone in a townhouse in a quiet neighborhood there, about an hour away, and she took us to dinner at a nicer restaurant than she usually chose. She seemed genuinely happy for us. She asked about the closing timeline, asked how the process worked, asked whether we were using a financial advisor or just going to keep the proceeds in savings temporarily. All reasonable questions, all delivered with warmth and a glass of Pinot Grigio. "I just want to make sure you're protected," she said, and she looked at me when she said it, not at Derek. "Real estate transactions can get complicated at the last minute. You two just need to stay on the same page." I smiled and said we were absolutely on the same page. She smiled back. The closing happened on a Wednesday. Derek and I sat across from the buyers and their agent, signed approximately 1,000 documents, and walked out with certified checks totaling $94,200. Our plan was to go to the bank together the next morning, Thursday, to access the safe deposit box we'd rented specifically for this purpose, deposit everything, and start the next chapter. That was the plan. Wednesday night, Derek got a call. He stepped into the hallway to take it, which he sometimes did when it was a work thing. He came back in, said it was his regional office, some issue with a tenant at a property he managed. He seemed distracted for the rest of the evening. I didn't think much of it. We ate leftover Thai food and watched half a documentary about deep-sea fish and went to bed. Thursday morning, I woke up at 7:15 and he was already gone. His side of the bed was made. Not slept-in looking, not rumpled, made, with the corners tucked the way he did when he was up early and being deliberate about something. His coffee mug was in the drying rack. Vince was sitting on the kitchen counter looking at me with the expression he reserved for when his breakfast was late, and Petra was nowhere visible, which meant she was under the bed. I texted Derek, "You're up early. Still meeting at the bank at 10?" No response. I showered, got dressed, texted again at 8:45. Nothing. At 9:30 I called him. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. His voice on the recording, calm and professional. "You've reached Derek Calloway. Please leave a message and I'll return your call." I left a message. I kept my voice light. I said I was heading to the bank and to call me when he was on his way. I drove through sleet. February in the D.C. suburbs means that particular misery where it's not quite cold enough to snow cleanly and not quite warm enough to just be rain, so everything is gray and wet, and the roads have that greasy quality that makes your stomach tighten at every stoplight. I parked in the bank's small lot, went inside, and gave my name at the safe deposit window. That's when the teller looked at her screen. That's when she said, "I'm sorry, ma'am. The box was accessed this morning." I gripped the edge of the counter. "What time?" I heard myself ask. She checked. 7:52 a.m. 7:52, while I was in the shower, while Vince was complaining about his breakfast, while I was standing in the steam thinking about nothing more complicated than which jacket to wear. "Who accessed it?" I asked, though some part of me already knew. "Your co-holder," she said carefully. "Derek Calloway." The lobby was warm. Someone behind me was talking on their phone, laughing at something. A child near the door was asking her father if they could get a snack after this. Everything was completely normal and completely wrong at the same time. I called Derek again, straight to voicemail this time, and then, because I didn't know what else to do, because my brain was still refusing to process the shape of what was happening, I called the one person I thought might know where he was. I called Diane. She answered on the second ring. Her voice was warm, composed, exactly the same as it always was. "Natalie, sweetheart," she said. "What a nice surprise." I told her I was looking for Derek, that he'd left early and wasn't answering his phone. I kept my voice steady. I was good at keeping my voice steady. There was a pause, brief, maybe 2 seconds, but I noticed it because I notice things. And then she said, "I'm sure he's just busy with work, honey. You know how he gets." "Diane," I said, "do you know where he is?" Another pause, shorter this time. "Tell me again," she said, her voice still perfectly pleasant. "Where exactly is your concern? Is this about the house closing?" Something cold moved through me. Not fear exactly, recognition. "I'll ask you one more time," I said, and my voice came out very quiet and very clear. "Where is your son? And where did the key to the safe deposit box go?" The silence that followed lasted long enough that I could hear very faintly the sound of her breathing. Calm, measured, like someone who had been expecting this phone call and had already decided exactly how much she was going to say. "Natalie," she said finally, "I think you should talk to Derek." And she hung up. I stood in the lobby of that bank with $94,200 missing, my husband unreachable, and the sudden, terrible understanding that the woman who had been filling my wine glass and asking about my sales quota for 2 years had known something I didn't, had maybe always known something I didn't. My hands were completely steady. That surprised me. What didn't surprise me, what I would spend the next several weeks slowly, painfully confirming, was that the warmth, the flowers, the careful questions, the refilled wine glasses, none of it had ever been about me. I just hadn't known what it was about yet. I drove home in a state that I can only describe as pressurized, like the moment before a tire blows, everything technically still functional, everything about to not be. I kept both hands on the wheel and drove the speed limit exactly and did not cry, which surprised me, because I am not someone who has ever been particularly stoic. I cry at insurance commercials. I cried when Petra had to have a tooth pulled last spring. But I pulled into the parking lot of our condo complex, our former condo complex technically, since we'd just sold it, remembered we were supposed to be out by the end of the month, and sat in the car for 4 minutes without making a single sound. We were still living there. We had 30 days post-closing to vacate. That had seemed generous 2 days ago. Now it felt like the walls were already someone else's. I went inside. Vince met me at the door because Vince always met me at the door, and I sat down on the kitchen floor in my coat and wet boots and let him climb into my lap and just held him there while my brain slowly, methodically, began to actually process what had happened. $94,200. Gone. Accessed at 7:52 in the morning by my husband, who had made the bed with military corners and washed his coffee mug and left without waking me. His phone was going to voicemail. His mother had hung up on me, and I was sitting on the floor of a condo I no longer owned in February, with 30 days to find somewhere to live and apparently no money to do it with. The shape of it was becoming clear. The shape of it was nauseating. I called Cordelia, my realtor. She picked up on the 3rd ring, and when I told her what had happened, there was a silence that meant she was choosing her words carefully. "Natalie," she said, "did the funds go directly into a joint account or into the safe deposit box?" "Box," I said. "Certified checks made out to both of us. We were going to deposit them together this morning." Another pause. "Okay, call your bank's fraud department, not the general line. And then you need to call an attorney today, not tomorrow, today." "Can the bank reverse it if the checks were made to both of us?" "That's what the attorney is for," she said, firmly but not unkindly. "I'm sending you a name. She handled a situation like this for a client of mine 2 years ago. She's good. Call her." I wrote down the name, Renata Osei, Family Law and Financial Fraud, Practice in Bethesda. I called Renata Osei's office 17 minutes later. Her assistant told me she had a cancellation at 4 o'clock and could I come in. I said yes, and then I sat on the floor a little longer because I still had 3 hours and because my legs felt like they'd been filled with wet sand. That was when I made the mistake of calling my mother. I say mistake not because my mother is a bad person. She's not. She loves me. She drove 9 hours to help me move into this condo when I bought it at 26. but because her first response to crisis is to assign blame in the most counterproductive direction available, which in this case was me. "Natalie, I told you not to put it in a box," she said, before I'd even finished explaining. "I said put it straight into a CD or a money market. Why would you leave certified checks sitting in a—" "Mom, that's not helpful right now." "I'm just saying, if the money had been in an account, he could have transferred it out of a joint account just as easily. That's not the point." "Well, what did you expect? You barely knew him before you—" I hung up. Gently. I hung up gently because I am 31 years old and I have been working on my communication patterns, but I did hang up. I sat with the silence. The refrigerator hummed. Petra appeared from wherever she'd been hiding and sat at the entrance to the kitchen, watching me with those amber eyes that always looked faintly judgmental. "I know," I told her. She flicked her tail once and walked away. I spent the next 2 hours going through every document I could find: the closing paperwork, our original bank account statements, the safe deposit box rental agreement, which both Derek and I had signed. The lease on the box required both signatures to open, except that wasn't quite right, was it? Either co-holder could access it independently. That was in the agreement. I had known that technically and had not thought about it as a vulnerability because I had been thinking about Derek as a partner instead of as a risk. That was the thing I kept coming back to. I was good at assessing risk in every area of my professional life. I ran quarterly pipeline reviews. I built contingency plans for deals that could fall through. I had a backup close strategy for every major account. And in my personal life, with the person I had legally bound myself to, I had simply not run the numbers. I had not looked for the structural problems underneath. The documentary about deep-sea fish was still paused on our television from the night before. I turned it off. At 3:15, I was getting ready to leave for Bethesda when my phone buzzed. Not a call, a text. Unknown number, Maryland area code. It said, "This is Renata Osei's paralegal, Theo. Before your appointment, do you have access to any of your husband's email or shared accounts? Screenshots of anything financial, property-related, or communication with third parties. Bring everything you have, paper or digital. Don't contact him again before you meet with Renata." I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I went to my laptop. Derek and I had shared a Google account for household things, grocery lists, utility logins, the kind of domestic infrastructure that accretes over a marriage without anyone deciding it. I had the password because I'd set it up. I opened it. The account was still active. He hadn't changed the password yet. I went to the shared calendar first. The thing about Diane's visit the week before, the nice restaurant, the pointed questions about our closing timeline, I had filed that away as warmth and interest. Looking at the calendar now, I saw that Derek had added a recurring event 3 weeks ago, every Tuesday at noon. D. Meeting. No location, no description. I went back 6 months. The Tuesday meetings had started in October, right around when we'd listed the condo. Then I opened the Gmail. I wasn't looking for anything specific. I was looking for everything. And what I found, buried in a thread between Derek and an email address I didn't recognize, the display name just G, was a series of messages that went back 11 months. The most recent one was from Monday night, time-stamped at 11:47 p.m. while I'd been asleep. Derek had written, "It's done. Closing was today. Moving forward with the original plan. Tell her I said thanks." I read it 3 times. Tell her I said thanks. Her. I forwarding the entire thread to my personal email, then photographed the screen with my phone for redundancy. My hands were steady. They had been steady all day, which was the strangest part, because internally I felt like I was standing in the middle of a building that was very quietly coming down around me. I closed the laptop and picked up my keys. Renata Osei's office was on the 3rd floor of a building near the Bethesda Metro, the kind of office that communicated competence without trying to impress you. Good chairs, no artwork that was trying too hard, a paralegal who handed me a legal pad and a pen before I'd even sat down. Renata herself was in her mid-40s, with cropped natural hair and reading glasses pushed up on her head, and she had the specific manner of someone who had heard many terrible things and was not going to perform shock on my behalf, which I found deeply, unexpectedly comforting. I laid it out for her, all of it. The closing, the box, the empty lobby, Diane's phone call, the emails. When I finished, she looked at her notes for a moment. Then she said, "The G email. Do you have any idea who that is?" "No," I said, "but Diane is the only person I can think of who Derek would describe as her. He doesn't have sisters. His father's been out of the picture for 15 years. Renata nodded slowly. "The fact that the checks were certified and made out to both of you is actually relevant. A bank teller processing a certified check for deposit, or for cash, is supposed to verify both payees' endorsements. If Derek deposited or cashed those checks without your endorsement, the bank has liability exposure." I hadn't thought about it from that angle. So the bank may be on the hook for releasing funds on an improperly endorsed instrument. That's a separate avenue from going after Derek directly. She clicked her pen. "It also means we can freeze any account he might have moved that money into, if we move fast enough. Do you know if he has accounts you're not on?" "I don't know," I said. And then, because something had been sitting in the back of my mind since I'd seen those emails, he mentioned in one of those messages that they were moving forward with the original plan, which means there was a plan, before the closing, before the sale even closed. "Meaning this wasn't impulsive," Renata said. "No," I said. "This was a strategy." She looked at me over the top of her glasses. "Then we build a better one." Walking out of that office 45 minutes later, I had a retainer agreement signed, an emergency motion being drafted for a financial freeze, and the beginning of an understanding that I had been outmaneuvered over a very long time by at least 2 people who had been patient and deliberate about it. Derek had been patient. Diane had been patient. I could be patient too. I could be more than that. I sat in my car in the parking garage and pulled up the email thread on my phone again, read it one more time. "Tell her I said thanks." I thought about Diane refilling my wine glass, asking about my sales quota, saying at that dinner a week ago, "I just want to make sure you're protected." And then I thought about something I'd almost forgotten, something small, something I had registered at the time as nothing. The week after Derek and I had gotten married, Diane had sent a card. Not the flowers, which came immediately, a card a few days later. I remembered thinking it was sweet, that she was thorough. I had put the card in a drawer without examining it too carefully. I drove home. I went to the drawer in the bedroom where I kept cards and letters and the accumulated paper sentiment of the last 2 years. I found the card near the bottom, cream envelope, Diane's handwriting, elegant and upright. Inside, the printed message was generic, wishing you love and happiness in your new life together. But underneath it, in that same careful handwriting, Diane had added a personal note. I read it. I read it twice. Then I took a picture of it with my phone and sent it to Renata. My text said only, "Found something. Call me when you can." Because what Diane had written in her lovely handwriting on a wedding card she'd sent to the woman her son had married 18 months before he emptied her bank account and disappeared, what she had written changed the shape of everything I thought I understood about why this had happened, and it meant I wasn't the only one who'd been lied to. Renata called me back within 20 minutes. I was still sitting in the parking garage, the engine running for heat, watching other people's headlights sweep across the concrete ceiling. "Tell me exactly what the card says," she said. I read it to her, word for word. Diane had written in that elegant, upright hand, "Derek has always needed someone steady. I hope you'll be patient with him the way his father never was. Some debts take a long time to collect. D." Silence on the line. "Some debts take a long time to collect," Renata repeated slowly. That's what she wrote. "Natalie, do you know anything about Derek's father? You mentioned he's been out of the picture for 15 years. Only that he left when Derek was around 12. Derek never talked about him much, said it wasn't worth the energy." "I want you to do something for me tonight," Renata said. Don't touch anything in the apartment. Don't reach out to Derek or Diane. And tomorrow morning, I need you to come in at 8, because I have someone I want you to meet." The someone turned out to be a private investigator named Marcus Webb, mid-50s, compact, with the specific energy of a man who had heard every version of every story and had stopped being surprised by any of them. He had a folder on his knee when I walked into Renata's conference room at 8:05. He didn't open it until I sat down. "The email address," he said. "The one signed G. I ran it against some commercial data sources last night after Renata called me." He opened the folder. "It belongs to a woman named Gloria Stanhope. She's a notary and title facilitator based out of Rockville. She's also Diane Calloway's first cousin." I heard myself exhale slowly. Gloria processed at least 2 other real estate transactions in the past 4 years, where one party subsequently disputed the disbursement of proceeds, Marcus continued. Neither case went to criminal prosecution. Both settled quietly. He looked at me. "You're the third." "They've done this before," I said. It wasn't a question. "The pattern is consistent. Target is a property owner with equity. Derek enters a relationship. Diane builds rapport with the target. They wait for a liquidity event, a sale, an inheritance, an insurance payout. Then they move." I thought about the timeline. Derek and I had dated for 7 months before I'd moved in with him, 9 months before we'd gotten married. I had bought the condo at 26. By the time we married, I'd had it for 3 years, building equity the entire time. They had been patient, genuinely, methodically patient. "How long?" I asked. "How long do you think they'd been planning this specifically?" Marcus glanced at Renata. "The Tuesday meetings that appeared on his calendar starting in October, we believe those were with Gloria, coordinating the timing around your closing date. So at minimum, 5 months of active planning." He paused. "But the relationship itself may have been initiated with this outcome in mind from the beginning." The beginning. From early spring, 2 years ago. A birthday dinner. A tall, calm, funny man who understood structural problems underneath a fine exterior. I sat with that for a moment. Really sat with it. "Okay," I said. "What do we do?" What we did over the next 6 weeks was build a case that Renata later described to me as unusually complete for this type of fraud. The bank's own liability exposure turned out to be significant. The certified checks had been made payable to both Derek Calloway and Natalie Calloway, and the bank branch that had processed the transaction, a different branch from the one I'd gone to that morning, one across town, had deposited the full amount into a sole account in Derek's name without obtaining my endorsement. That was a violation of the Uniform Commercial Code. The bank's legal team, when presented with this, moved quickly from denial to negotiation. Derek, it turned out, had opened a new individual account at that second branch 11 days before our closing. Marcus found it. He also found that Derek had wired $87,000 of the $94,200 to an account in Delaware within 4 hours of the deposit clearing. The remaining $7,200 had been withdrawn as cash. The Delaware account was in the name of a holding company. The registered agent for that holding company was Gloria Stanhope. Renata filed the emergency financial freeze motion and the civil complaint on the same afternoon. The U.S. Attorney's Office received a referral package from Renata's office 3 days later. I did not have to do anything except sign documents and answer questions clearly and completely, which I was good at. Answering questions clearly and completely is a skill I had built over a decade of sales calls, and I had never been more grateful for it. Derek surfaced 17 days after the morning he'd made the bed and left. He called my cell phone from a number I didn't recognize, which meant I almost didn't answer. I answered because Renata had told me to answer any unknown calls and to record them, which in Maryland requires only one-party consent. "Natalie," his voice sounded the same. That was somehow the most disorienting part, calm, dry, a little tired. "I want you to know I'm sorry." "Where are you?" I said. "That doesn't matter right now. I just wanted—" "Derek, I'm going to stop you. I have an attorney. You should talk to yours. That's genuinely all I have to say to you." I paused. "Actually, one more thing. The G you emailed Monday night? Tell her the plan didn't work." Silence. 3 seconds. 4. "I'll talk to my lawyer," he said, and hung up. I sent the recording to Renata within 60 seconds. Diane was harder. I had thought about Diane every day since that phone call in the bank lobby. I had thought about the flowers she sent after our courthouse wedding, the way she refilled my wine glass, the careful, interested questions. I had turned it over and over, looking for the moment I should have seen it, the tell, the slip, the thing that should have warned me. I never found a clean one. She was that good. Renata advised me to have no contact with Diane. I followed that advice for exactly 5 weeks. On the 38th day, I drove to Baltimore. I want to be honest about why I did it. It wasn't for any strategic purpose. Renata had enough. Marcus had enough. The U.S. Attorney's Office had enough. I didn't need anything from Diane. I drove to Baltimore because there was something I needed to say out loud, to her face, in her presence, and I had decided that I was allowed to need that. Her townhouse was in a neighborhood of brick row houses, with window boxes and tidy stoops. It was early March by then, still cold, but the particular cold that has started to lose its conviction. I rang the bell at 10 in the morning. She answered the door in a cardigan and reading glasses, and for one fraction of a second, before she registered who was standing there, her face was completely open. Just a woman answering her door on a Tuesday morning. Then she saw me. She didn't slam the door, didn't scream or run. She just went very still, and the pleasant composure came back down like a curtain, and she said, "Natalie, I'm not sure this is a good idea." "I know," I said. "I'm not here to make anything worse for your legal situation. I just have one thing I want to say." She waited. Her hand was still on the doorframe. "I read your wedding card again," I said. "The one you sent after we got married. Some debts take a long time to collect. I've been thinking about that line for 6 weeks." I looked at her directly. "You weren't talking about me, were you? You weren't talking about the condo or the money. You were talking about Derek's father. Something he did. Something you've been waiting 15 years to make right." Something moved across her face. It was the first genuinely unguarded expression I had ever seen from her, and it was complicated. Not guilt exactly, but not nothing either. "You don't know what he took from us," she said. Her voice was still controlled, but only just. "No," I said, "I don't, and I'm sorry for whatever it was. I mean that." I let that sit for a second. "But whatever he took from you, I wasn't him. I was 29 years old, and I thought your son was someone worth building a life with. And you sat across from me at dinner and refilled my wine glass and asked about my sales quota. And the whole time—" I stopped, steadied myself. "The whole time I was just a vehicle, a line item in a plan." The silence between us was long enough that a car went by on the street and a dog barked somewhere down the block. "I want you to know," I said finally, "that I'm not angry at you in the way you probably expect. I'm not going to stand here and scream at you. But I am going to make sure the people who are supposed to know what you did actually know what you did. Every piece of it. That's already happening." I took a breath. "And I want you to know that the thing you were trying to protect him from, the thing his father did, whatever that was, you taught Derek to do a version of it to someone else. You taught him that people are problems to be solved. You taught him that patiently." I paused. "I hope that was worth it to you." I turned and walked back to my car. She didn't call after me. She didn't say anything at all. I drove back to D.C. with the windows down, even though it was 43 degrees, because I needed the air. The legal proceedings took several more months to resolve. Derek was located in Wilmington, Delaware in April, staying in a short-term rental 2 blocks from Gloria Stanhope's business address. He was charged federally with wire fraud. Gloria Stanhope was charged as a co-conspirator. Diane was not charged criminally. There was not sufficient evidence to prove she had known in advance about the specific mechanics of the transfer, only that she had encouraged the general scheme and was aware of its existence. That distinction frustrated me for a while. Then Renata explained that the civil suit could name her as a party, which it did. The bank settled with me for $94,200 plus interest and legal fees, a total of just over $103,000 within 3 months of Renata filing the complaint. They were not interested in litigating their own teller's failure to verify dual endorsement. The wire fraud case against Derek resulted in a guilty plea and 18 months in a federal facility, with restitution ordered. Gloria Stanhope took a plea deal with a lighter sentence in exchange for cooperation. The Delaware holding company was dissolved, and its remaining assets, roughly $61,000, were seized and applied toward restitution. I got my money back. All of it. Technically more than all of it. That almost never happens, Renata told me. I believe her. The divorce was finalized in November, 9 months after that February morning. I signed the last document in Renata's conference room, the same room where Marcus Webb had opened his folder and changed the shape of everything I was dealing with. Renata shook my hand afterward. She said, "You handled this better than most people handle things that are much smaller." I thanked her and meant it. I found a 2-bedroom apartment in a different suburb, closer to the city. It has good light in the mornings and a small balcony where I have put exactly 1 plant, which I am attempting to keep alive as a project. Vince is adjusting well, because Vince adjusts to everything. He found the best sunny spot in the new apartment within approximately 40 minutes of arrival. Petra required 10 days of pointed sulking before she acknowledged that the new location was acceptable. This felt appropriate. I have not spoken to Derek again since that phone call. I don't expect to. I have thought about him less than I expected. Not because I'm not angry, but because anger at Derek feels like trying to be angry at a tool that someone else pointed in my direction. The person I think about more is Diane, and specifically that fraction of a second on her doorstep when her face was just open, before she saw me, before the curtain came back down. I think about whatever Derek's father did to her 15 years ago, the debt she decided needed collecting. I don't know the details, and I don't plan to find them out, because knowing them would require me to extend more understanding than I currently have available, and I'm working on being honest about my limits. What I know is this: she spent 2 years in my life, at my dinner table, in my conversations, carefully and pleasantly preparing the ground for someone to take something from me.